Yeah, we back. Now, today's video is going to be a follow-up video to one I did the other day on the Patreon. Now, if you are a member of the Patreon family, then you already know I made the comparison between President Ibrahim Traoré and Christophe, the King of Haiti, in terms of their administration, style of governance, their handling of the public finances and the economy, as well as the propaganda and the slander campaign that was waged against them by the Western media. Now, today I'm going to make a video exploring the many similarities between the two men. Now, of course, the most obvious similarity is the fact that both individuals are military men. Their identity, their upbringing, they were forged in the military under combat. When it came to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, he was formally trained in the military academies, I believe out in Morocco. And of course, he saw experience fighting the jihadist terrorism in the Sahel as a captain. And of course, when it came to Christophe, it was the same exact thing. I believe his military career started out as a child soldier in the French military, right? Take a look up on the screen. A large monument in the central square in Savannah, Georgia, honors the Chasseurs Volontaires of Saint-Domingue, a regiment of free men of African descent from what is now Haiti, who fought there for American independence in 1779. Standing alongside the armed soldiers depicted in the monument is a young drummer boy. He is Christophe at 12 years old and the future king of Haiti. Now, if you go down to Georgia, down in the South, you'll see this monument. And of course, as we already know, the French government provided assistance to the American colonists that were fighting for independence back in 1776, right? And in this monument you see a young drummer boy. That was Christophe beating the drums. So his military career began as a child under the command of the French government. So yes, that would mean during his life Christophe was active in the two main revolutionary wars of the time, the American War of Independence and the Haitian War of Independence. Now, the next similarity between the two men is how they came to power. Of course, as you already know, through the force of arms. Back in 2022, the captain woke up one day, he said, listen, I'm taking power, right? You got the power, I'm taking that, right? Let me hold that. Boom, I'm taking power. And of course, when it came to Christophe, he rose to power in the midst of the 1807 Haitian Civil War, right? After the death of Dessalines, the military was split into two factions, with the northern generals rallying under Christophe's command and the southern mixed race generals rallying under the command of General Alexander Pétion. Now, this would lead to the government being split into two regimes, with Christophe governing in the north and Pétion governing in the south. And of course, as we already know, Christophe named his territory the Kingdom of Haiti, and he would rule over it for the next 13 years until his death. Now, another comparison that I would make between Christophe and Captain Ibrahim Traoré is the fact that both of them suffered an intense propaganda and slander campaign from the Western media, right? Of course, as you already know, and just like I've documented on my channel, we've seen headlines like this: Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré, a savior or a dictator? And of course, as you remember, I reacted to the article that came out from the Council on Foreign Relations, right? They said this: rather than being a beacon of hope, the Burkinabe tyrant Ibrahim Traoré is a pointer to everything that is wrong with the continent, right? So the Council on Foreign Relations saying he's a tyrant. He embodies everything that is wrong with the continent of Africa, right? The dictator killing his own civilians, right? Take a look up on the screen. The UN human rights chief is concerned about the rise in the killings of civilians in Burkina Faso, right? Now, keep in mind, these civilians they're talking about are terrorists and terrorist affiliates, right? But they're trying to reframe the narrative and saying that he's marching and killing his own citizens, right? The propaganda against the captain been ridiculous. And of course, when it came to Christophe during his time, it was no different. In fact, I would say that it was way more intense given the geopolitical landscape, right? Take a look up on the screen. Christophe's attempts to demonstrate to the world that the Negroes were capable of creating and maintaining a stable and efficient government had not achieved much success. For even though law and order prevailed throughout his dominion and his propagandists had written books defending him, in general, the people in the other lands were either ignorant of the facts or inclined to laugh at his pretensions. The French journals in particular carried on a regular campaign of slander and mockery. I repeat, the French journals in particular carried on a regular campaign of slander and mockery. He was presented as a vain and despotic savage. His monarchy, his hereditary nobility, his formal and elaborate court were all held up to ridicule, while his positive achievements were deliberately ignored. Now, time out. That goes to show you that media propaganda, information warfare is nothing new, especially when it comes to the adversary. This is what they do. Now, if you saw in that book, it said that even though Law and order prevailed throughout the kingdom. Law and order prevailed throughout his dominion. And even though his propagandists had written books defending him, right? On my channel, we have read several books that came out under Christophe's government, right? But those books were either deliberately erased from the historical record or they were deliberately ignored. And instead, the Western governments and the Western media decided to embark on a slander and mockery campaign, as they said, right? Painting him as a savage, a despotic, vain individual, when in reality, he had a stable government, a prosperous population coming fresh out of slavery, but instead they painted a different image in their newspapers and their journals. And of course, the reason why they did that was because they wanted to maintain the status quo. The very existence of Christophe's government was a slap in the face to the so-called racial ideology that was prevalent at the time, right? It pretty much debunked all the stereotypes they had of black men and women in their mind. Here you have a leader with his own government, a black man with his own administration. He has established the largest military fortification in all of the Western Hemisphere, the Citadel, right? He has faced off with all the colonial powers, the French, the British, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and he has still not been defeated. He is still in power and he is prospering. He's rich and powerful, right? It was a slap in the face to the so-called racial superiority of the Europeans that they were propagating during that time. So of course they had to discredit him, dehumanize him, and paint him as this caricature of who he really was. Now, the next arena that I want to explore the similarities between the two men is military and defense, right? Take a look up on the screen. Burkina Faso's military spending and defense budget has seen substantial increases, with a nearly 47% rise from 2022 to 2023. Military-led governments in the Sahel posted double-digit increases as global defense spending reached record highs. Mali's military spending rose 38% from 2020 to 2024. Burkina Faso's budget jumped 108% between 2021 and 2024, while Niger increased its spending by 56% from 2022 to 2024. Now, as you can see, the Burkina Faso military and defense budget has jumped over 100%. Right. So as you can see, the captain is pouring as many resources as he can into military defense. And we can see that by the recent report that came out from the World Bank that shows that the economy is growing. Everything is moving in a positive direction. And that goes to show that he is making progress in the fight against terrorism because economic activity is beginning to increase. Now, when it came to Christophe, it was the same exact thing. Right. A lot of attention was paid to military defense. Take a look up on the screen. Christophe set out to improve all aspects of life in the northern province. One of his major concerns and preoccupation was defending his country from internal and external aggression. He had a huge fortress built on a mountain peak overlooking the Cap Harbor, 3,000 feet above the sea. Large cisterns and storehouses in the fortress's interior were designed to store enough food and water for 5,000 defenders for up to 1 year. Now, the Citadel was another slap in the face to the so-called racial ideology of that time of European supremacy, because here you have a black man that has come to power through the force of arms, right? Coming fresh out of slavery. Not only did he destroy the French military, one of the main, white supremacist militaries of the time, right? But he has established a government, put it on an economic footing of prosperity, and he has established the largest military fortification in this side of the world, a pure masterpiece, right? But just like I mentioned before, going back to propaganda warfare, instead of giving Christophe his proper respect for establishing such an impressive piece of work, the Western newspapers and journals at the time continued to embark on a slander campaign, a mockery campaign against Christophe, saying that, once again, he's a barbaric savage, he's a tyrant, enslaving his own people so he could build a castle, basically saying that Christophe was violating human rights in order to build the Citadel, which was ironic because those same exact governments held people in bondage at the same exact time. The same people condemning Christophe for so-called violating human rights actually had slaves in their countries. When in reality, Christophe did not enslave his own people to build the Citadel because the Citadel being constructed was a matter of national security. When they were building the Citadel, that was seen as an act of service to the nation, right? So if you died while you were building the Citadel, that was seen as you laying down your life for liberty and independence. It wasn't seen as a negative thing. It was seen as an honorable thing. You died for the country, right? And during that time, the Haitians the way they viewed death was very unorthodox. They did not view death as something to be feared or something to be scared of. They viewed death as an honorable thing, especially if it was an act of service to the nation and the preservation of liberty and independence. But of course, in the Western newspapers, they tried to twist the narrative in saying that Christophe is violating human rights and he's enslaving his own people to build the Citadel. Listen, man, the adversary has never changed his ways in 200 years. But anyways, the next comparison I want to make between the two men is in the arena of the economy, right? Take a look up on the screen. The World Bank's Burkina Faso economic update for April 2025 indicates the country's economy grew by 4.9% in 2024, a significant increase from 3% in 2023. The growth was primarily driven by the services and agriculture sectors, supported by an improved security situation and favorable weather. The strong growth in the agriculture and service sector in 2024 reduced the extreme poverty rate by 3 points to 23.2%, with a sharper decline in rural areas. Now, of course, I did a video on that. And of course, out of a population of 23 million, if you do the math, 3% drop in poverty, that means 700,000 citizens were raised out of poverty, lifted out of poverty in a single year, in a single calendar year, while at the same time fighting a jihadist terrorist insurgency. Like I said, that's unheard of. That is literally unheard of. To be fighting a war within your own borders and at the same time still stimulating the economy and getting economic growth and improving the lives of the citizens, that is unheard of. That means he's one of the best leaders in the world, literally. And of course, when it came to Christophe, the economic prosperity was very similar under his rule, right? Take a look up on the screen. Under his guiding hand, the country prospered. Produce of every kind poured in from the plantations. A small navy patrolled the coast, and a profitable commerce was developed with other nations. The state coffers were filled to overflowing, the annual revenue amounting to $3.5 million. The nobility and landowners became wealthy, and want and hunger disappeared. The rural laborers enjoying 1/4 of the crops. The schools flourished. A printing press was established, and a theater was built near Cap-en-Louis. Indeed, in prosperity and in grandeur, the kingdom of Haiti was beginning to rival the old colony of Saint-Domingue. Now, when they said the kingdom of Haiti was beginning to rival the old colony of Saint-Domingue, Saint-Domingue was the name of the French colony when the island was under the rule of the French, the days of slavery. And that was the richest colony in the world. So for them to say that Christophe's government was beginning to rival the old colony of Saint-Domingue when it came to prosperity and grandeur, that's a major statement. That's a major statement. They're basically saying that Christophe was headed to becoming a world power because the French colony of Saint-Domingue, in terms of its prosperity and productivity, was on the level of a world power. So they're saying that Christophe was beginning to rival the richest colony in the world, which means that he was headed to becoming a world power. And keep in mind, he was only in power for 13 years. So coming fresh out of slavery in less than 20 years, he was headed towards the trajectory of becoming a world power. That is absolutely insane. Now take a look up on the screen. In a letter to Thomas Clarkson, Christophe described his motivation behind his agricultural policy. He said, "Farming has been greatly extended, both by the increase in the number of proprietors and by the steps I have taken against men of no known professions, the idle and the vagabond, who have taken refuge in the cities and towns where they were leading a useless and dissolute existence. By sending them back to the land, I put them in a position to lead a secure life and one more profitable to public morality." Now, another area of comparison that I would draw between the two men is both of them had diplomatic incidents, so to speak, with the United States government, right? We already know earlier in the year, the scandal that took place between the captain and General Michael Langley, the United States Marine Corps 4-star general, right? Take a look up on the screen. In April and May 2025, United States General Michael Langley, head of the United States Africa Command, made accusations against Burkina Faso's president Ibrahim Traoré regarding the use of the country's gold reserves. These accusations were made during a United States Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on April 3rd, 2025, and were part of a broader discussion on countering Chinese and Russian influence in Africa. Langley's comments implied that Traoré was diverting Burkina Faso's gold reserves, which are estimated at around $4 billion, to sustain his military rule. Now, of course, as we already know, General Michael Langley suffered intense international backlash and continental backlash to the point where he had to run to the media. He did an interview out in Kenya, basically retracting his statement saying, listen, we don't got no problem with the captain. Pan-Africanism is real. Pan-Africanism is strong. I don't got no beef. I'm a black man just like you, right? Had that man copping pleas in the media. And of course, if you remember, if you're a part of the Patreon family, we spoke about how just a few weeks after that, the United States sent out an ambassador or a special envoy to Burkina Faso to kind of, reconcile the relationship, right? As you can see. Now, take a look up on the screen. United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for West Africa, William Stevens, arrived in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, on Tuesday as part of an initiative launched by President Donald Trump to revive diplomatic ties between Washington and Burkina Faso. Now, during Christophe's time in power, You know, he also had on and off turbulent relationships with the United States, right? Take a look up on the screen. Christophe did not fare so well in his commercial dealings with the United States. During the reign of Dessalines, the American Congress had passed a law in 1806 prohibiting trade with any portion of Hispaniola not acknowledging French authority, partly to assuage Napoleon, who demanded in no uncertain terms that all commerce with the Negroes be stopped, and partly because of the effect of an independent Negro state might have on the slave system in the United States. This act was renewed in 1807 and continued until 1809. At the onset of his career, therefore, Christophe had no official trade with the United States. Even when commerce was renewed in 1810, there was no great increase in trade. Now, as you can see, from 1807 to about 1811, the Americans didn't really engage in any direct trade with Christophe. Now, they began to engage in trade and commerce around 1811, but take a look up on the screen. American merchants found that Englishmen were enjoying a 50% reduction in duties, nor did Christophe improve matters. In 1811, finding himself unable to recover large sums entrusted to the firm of Vaughan, Calf and Brune of Baltimore for the purchase of goods, Christophe seized the property valued at about $125,000 from American traders in Haiti. And in answer to their protests, he told them to obtain redress from the Baltimore firm if they were able. Thus, his American commerce dwindled. Now, fast forward to 1817, the United States government wanted to, reestablish or strengthen trade relations with Christophe's government. And in fact, I did a video on that about 8 months ago entitled The 1817 Conflict Between the U.S. Government and the King of Haiti. Go check that out. Basically, the president at that time, I believe it was James Monroe, he had sent out a special envoy, very similar to how Trump sent out a special envoy to Burkina Faso. Now, if you watch that video, if you remember, the reason for the conflict is that Christophe refused to meet with the American diplomat or the American envoy. And the reason for that is because in the letter they sent out to him, they did not refer to him as the king of Haiti, right? They referred to him as the general of Saint-Domingue. And Saint-Domingue was the name of the French colony. So Christophe felt disrespected that the Americans did not acknowledge the name of the country, which was the independent sovereign territory, the Kingdom of Haiti. Instead, they still called it the colonial name of Saint-Domingue, as if it was still under French rule. And they did not refer to him as King Christophe. They referred to him as General Christophe. So Christophe felt disrespected and he refused to meet with the American envoy. Now, later on, I believe they did eventually end up, getting back on, reconciled terms, because when I go to the newspaper that came out from Christophe's government, the Royal Gazette of Haiti, the article from August 1817, right? If you read the description, take a look up on the screen. At the bottom, it says, trade statistics given at the end demonstrate robust imports and exports out of Cap Henri. 71 ships carrying 17 million pounds of sugar and coffee. And when you go to the last page in the article, it actually lists all the trade activity that was happening coming out of Christophe's territory, right? And of course, like I mentioned before, the main commodities, of course, were sugar and coffee, but they also had other products such as, cotton and molasses and things like that. And of course, Christophe was importing weapons and ammunition and construction materials and luxury goods and things like that. So a lot of trade activity was happening in Christophe's government. And when you examine the trade statistics in that article, you see all the various nations that were engaging in trade with Christophe during that time, right? And among them with the United States, right? In fact, the majority of the ships coming in and out of the harbor were American ships. And in second place, you had British ships. And then after that, you had ships coming in and out of St. Thomas with other colonies, the island of St. Thomas. And then, of course, the smaller ships, Dutch ships, things like that. And, but the main ones were the British, the Americans, and some Danish ships. And when you examine this level of trade, you can see that this is a multi-million-dollar level of commerce going on over here, right? Millions and millions of dollars of commerce going on, right? So, of course, the United States, when they decided to engage in commerce with Christophe, it wasn't because they respected him as a black man. It was simply because he had things for sale that the world needed at that time, right? Sugar and coffee was one of the main commodities at that time, similar to how, uranium and gold and cobalt and coltan and things like that, very important in the modern day. So many nations wanted a piece of the action. The British wanted a piece of the sugar and the coffee. The Americans wanted a piece of the sugar and the coffee, right? The Danish and the Dutch and everybody else, they wanted a piece of the sugar and the coffee, right? It doesn't matter if a black man is the leader, even though they hate black people, they still need the sugar and the coffee. Now, the next comparison that I would draw between the two leaders is both of them suffered espionage tactics by the French, right? Take a look up on the screen if you remember. Back at the top of the year, right? Burkina Faso releases 4 French nationals after Morocco intervened. Now, that article is coming from France 24, right? That's the French state-owned media. Now, they did not say that these were 4 French intelligence agents. They said these were 4 French nationals, right? Anyway, let's continue. 4 French nationals held in Burkina Faso for over a year on espionage accusations have been released. France's Foreign Intelligence Service said Thursday, with Paris thanking Morocco for its mediation in the case. The DGSE told AFP. Now, the DGSE, that's the French equivalent of the CIA, right? So the CIA, that's the American government. The DGSE, that's essentially the CIA for the French government. The DGSE told AFP that the 4 had been freed, confirming reports in the Moroccan media. They did not give further details. Now, for those of y'all that have been following my channel for a very long time, of course, I was documenting that whole entire, fiasco, right? So you had these, 4 French nationals, right, quote unquote, that came to Burkina Faso under the guise of being computer technicians, right, computer nerds. And then, of course, they were detected, they were detained and arrested. And then they went through their cell phones and their documents. And then, of course, it came out that these guys were actually intelligence agents, right? Working on behalf of the French government, taking pictures of sensitive government buildings, things like that. And they were arrested and detained in Burkina Faso for over a year. And Morocco, they intervened on behalf of the French because Morocco has good relations with both the French and the Burkina Faso leadership. And I believe, like I said before, Captain Ibrahim Traoré was actually, he did some of his military training in Morocco. So that's where that connection was made. And for those of y'all as well, you already know back in 1814, Christophe suffered a similar incident with the French government. Take a look up on the screen. In November 1814, the French commissioner, Augustin Franco de Medina, who had formerly been a plantation owner in Spanish Santo Domingo, left Jamaica for Monte Cristi, where he stopped to inspect his estates. When he crossed the border into Haiti, Christophe, having been forewarned, was ready for him. He was proclaimed to be a spy and his papers were seized. And of course, as you already know, he was later arrested and he was killed on charges of espionage. Rest in peace, Augustin Franco de Medina. Now, as you can see, due to the fact that both Captain Ibrahim Traoré and Christophe had formidable intelligence networks, they could not be easily penetrated by the adversary, right? So here we have this agent of the French tried to infiltrate Christophe's territory. He left Jamaica, went to the Dominican Republic, the modern DR territory, crossed the border into Haiti, and he was immediately arrested. Rest in peace to the king, man. Long live the king, man. Now, another similarity I draw between the two men is their anti-French foreign policy, right? When it comes to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, we see that in his strengthening ties with Russia and Vladimir Putin, right? And in fact, I just seen an article in the New York Times last week. A French general said that Russia sees France as its main enemy, right? So one of the top French generals, Thierry Boucard, the man right here behind Macron, he says that France and Russia currently right now are adversaries. And take a look up on the screen. Burkina Faso and Russia signed the final document of their electronuclear program. So my enemy, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. As you can see, that's the foreign policy employed by Captain Ibrahim Traoré. And during his time, Christophe employed a very similar foreign policy as well, right? Strengthening his ties with the enemies of the French. Whoever was the enemy of the French, Christophe was going to stand next to you. Take a look up on the screen. Throughout the Middle Ages and the early modern period, France and England were often bitter rivals, with both nations' monarchs claiming control over France and France routinely allying against England with their other rival Scotland until the union of the crowns. Now, we even saw this rivalry between the French and the British during the American Revolutionary War, where the French came to the assistance of the Americans to undermine British influence in North America. And when it came to Christophe's foreign policy, he decided to get closer to the British once again, because the British, going back to the days of the Middle Ages, the arch rivals, the bitter enemies of the French, right? So take a look up on the screen. Haiti primarily exported agricultural products to Britain, including sugar, coffee, and cotton. And Britain provided Haiti with much needed supplies like manufactured goods and military supplies. This trade was a crucial factor in the economic boom experienced under Christophe's kingdom. The revenue generated allowed the Haitian government and the officials to prosper. Now take a look up on the screen. In 1808 and 1809, Christophe cooperated with the English, who launched an attack against the French forces in Spanish Santo Domingo by sending arms to the Spanish insurgents. Now, once again, in a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so Christophe collaborated with the British to drive the remaining French forces out of Spanish Santo Domingo. Very similar to the alliance that you see happening with the captain and Russia, right? And we see France, crying all the goddamn time, crying about Russia, right? Russia undermining their so-called interests. The same way the British were undermining their so-called interests. Now, in summary, as you can see, there are many similarities between the captain and Christophe, the ancestor. Now, I'm not putting Captain Ibrahim Traoré on the same level as Christophe. He still has a long way to go because, like they said, Christophe was headed to becoming a world power, right? The captain is not there yet, but he's definitely on the right path. I tell you that. He's definitely moving in the right direction. Definitely moving in the right direction for sure, for certainly. Now, my biggest issue and the thing I talk about the most is the importance of political continuity, making sure that even after the captain is gone, right? Because he's not going to be in power forever. He's not going to live forever. Making sure that his policies remain in place, remain on the books. Because when Christophe died, unfortunately, right, when the Southern generals took over, they abolished all of his projects. They did not continue on with the work, right? Obviously, the Southern mixed race generals and Christophe, they saw things in a different way. So when the Southern mixed race generals took power, they took the nation in a different direction, right? The wrong direction. They went off and signed reparations to the French, right? As soon as Christophe was gone, the Southern mixed race generals signed the country away to France. And that's why when it comes to me, when it comes to elections, listen, we not going to no elections. When they talk about the captain needs to go to elections, no. First of all, you need to give him more time to continue to build upon the progress he's already made. And number two, I'll be ready for elections when the captain is comfortable enough to where he feels like he has a successor, right? Where he feels comfortable enough to where he can send somebody, his own protege, to the elections that we know is going to continue on the work. Right. The last thing we need is somebody else taking power and going in the complete opposite direction, bringing the French back to the country, because that's what happened to Christophe. Christophe died, and the guys that came after, the Southern mixed race generals, they brought the French back to the country. So, and everything was erased. So, no, we're not going to no elections. We staying in power for as long as possible until the captain has a successor that he wants to send to the elections, and then we can talk about elections. But right now, it's about work. It's about getting to it. It's about construction. It's about building the economy. It's about securing the territory. That is at the top of the agenda, not organizing elections. That is not at the top of the agenda. Elections do not put food on the table. But as we can see with the captain lifting 700,000 people out of poverty, him being in power is putting food on the table. So as it stands right now, he needs to stay in power, at least for the foreseeable future. Anyways, man, it's your boy Nefakari, the Salim, back in the building. Yes, indeed. 21 Cannons, first single of the next project. Pinned comment at the top, link in the description. Subscribe to their Patreon, NTD1814, and I'm gone. Peace.
How you gonna leave me? I told you I love you. Pain in my heart and you knew I was trouble. Enemy watching, they wanna invade it. Hoping my brothers don't never betray us. Been on my mind and I hope I can save it. Look at my flaws, I don't see perfection. But I'm authentic, I'm whipping a 7. Like it's a phantom, I'm still manifesting. Gotta get money, I gotta get paid. Stay on my toes when I'm ducking these snakes. Go to my wrist and the queen on my arm. Feeling my energy, loving my charm. Might go put Destiny face on a piece. Ready for war, that's how you get peace. Know I'm protected, I'm ready for action. When I walk in, I need 21 cannons. Secret location, I'm up in the palace. One of a kind and she loving my manners. One of a kind and I'm telling the truth. His and her Bentleys, I gotta get two. Feeling like future, we never gon' lose. Feeling like Garvey, I'm running the block. Entering off firm and I'm letting off shots. King of the North and I'm up at the top. King of the North and I feel like Moise. Took a few losses, I'm back on my feet. Selling they soul for trinkets and cash. Right on the front like the leader from Chad. Feel like a see me, I feel like I'm Idris. Walking on gold, I handle my business. Honor, integrity, money, and power. Told me she love me, she want me in power. Told her I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Told her come over, come see me in person. Told her come over, I'm sick of the talking. Don't got no time cause that money be calling. Working all night and I'm up in the morning. Love when I call her, she love my attention. Body and soul, I'm truly protected. Back on that road and big body business. Told her I love her, I told her she mine. Get in that passenger seat, we gon' ride. Back on my mission, that money been stacking. Came from the bottom, I'm steady expanding. Run to the check and I pull up and vanish. Grabbing the neck from the back when I smash. Don't need no question, they know it's official. Come from the cloth and my life ain't no fiction. Ride for the scene like I'm Army enlist. Gotta stay focused, I'm moving deliberate. Heart of a king and my heart full of pain. Look at my neck and it's flooded with chains. And I got Destiny blood in my veins. Enemy watching, I stay with a flame. Keep it 100, they know how we move. Black on black beam, interior blue. How you gonna leave me? I told you I love you. Pain in my heart and you knew I was trouble. Enemy watching, they wanna invade it. Hoping my brothers don't never betray us. Been on my mind and I hope I can save us. Look at my flaws, I don't see perfection. But I'm authentic, I'm whipping a 7. Like it's a phantom, I'm still manifesting. Gotta get money, I gotta get paid. Stay on my toes when I'm ducking these
snakes. Go to my wrist and the queen on my arm. Feeling my energy, loving my charm. Might go put Desaline face on a piece. Ready for war, that's how you get peace. Know I'm protected, I'm ready for action. When I walk in, I need 21 cannons. Secret location, I'm up in the palace. One of a kind and she loving my manners. One of a kind and I'm telling the truth. His and her Bentleys, I gotta get two. Feeling like Future, we never gon' lose. Feeling like Garvey, I'm running the block. Entering off firm and I'm letting off shots. King of the North and I'm up at the top.
How you gon' leave me? I told you I love you. Pain in my heart and you knew I was trouble. Enemy watching, they want to invade it. Hoping my brothers don't never betray us. Been on my mind and I hope I can save us. Look at my flaws, I don't see